Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the third webinar in the In Conversation series. It's great to have so many of you online this afternoon. I think we have several students from Aston, some alumni here in the UK, and some guys joining us from the States, so welcome. Just to bring everybody up to date, this is the third webinar. Prior to this, we've explored entrepreneurship, career development and careers, but I'm very pleased to have Johnny Vulkan with us this afternoon. We're going to have a trot through marketing, all things marketing, advertising agencies and so on. Should be an interesting 59 minutes as it's 4 minutes past 6 now. Just a brief intro to Johnny before we go across and have a chat with him. Johnny obviously is an Aston graduate, did MAS here, and now is or was the founding member of Anomaly Communications, a major advertising agency in the States with offices, and I just need to get this right, 3 of them, Toronto, sorry, 4 of them, 5 of them, Toronto, London, Amsterdam, Shanghai and New York. So, Johnny, I'm not quite sure where in the world you're going to be this afternoon.
Hi, well today I'm in neither of those. I'm actually in San Francisco.
Ah, very nice too.
We have a 6th office as well, which is in Los Angeles, which we opened about 6 months ago. So I'm actually doing some work with them at the end of this week. But yes, we started in New York. As you can probably tell, I'm from England originally and graduated in '92 from Aston, very many happy memories, and moved to the States in 1999. So I've been here 17 years, and would consider myself generally bilingual, although I do spell like an American, which can be tricky sometimes. I lose my U's.
Yeah, I've just taken a look at the weather there, and I think it's similar to what we have today, actually. We're on a nice blue sky here, and I think we're about 14 degrees, so I think it's a bit cloudy your side, but apart from that, I think it's pretty similar. Johnny, if it's okay with you, we'd like to really divide this up into 3 areas, really. Start off with a bio from yourself, because it'd be great for everybody to understand where you come from, what you've done, and so on. Maybe have a talk through after that your early career, a little bit about advertising agencies, because they can be mysterious places. Some view on some big marketing issues. There's several, 3 or 4 around at the moment that keep cropping up on our end. It'd be interesting to know if they crop up at yours. And then an important thing on career advice, student advice, that sort of thing. And to everybody, keep your questions coming through. When they pop up on the screen, we'll introduce them to the conversation, and our aim is to finish by 7 o'clock. So can I pass that back to you now, Johnny, just talk us through a little bit about what you've done, how you've moved through your career and that sort of thing.
Yeah. All right, well, I'll
Right, yeah, that would appear that Johnny's had some kind of problem. It seemed pretty unfortunate, just as he was about to start talking.
Yeah. To give everybody a bit of background, Johnny started off, I think graduated from Aston in '92, and was very much focusing on management administration, and decided that he wanted to join an advertising agency. And I think from the way things work here currently, I think from our marketing students, about 10% end up in advertising, and most of them end up on client side. So it was a very interesting choice, and I think Johnny's got a really good story about how he landed a job at Saatchi's in the 80s. And in the 80s, Saatchi's was probably one of the biggest worldwide agencies. But Johnny's taken a bit of an entrepreneurship focus on his marketing and business in general. So he's very much been a thought leader and an innovator in his field. So we're hoping to unpack that a little bit. Be very interesting to hear from everybody out there while we've got a few minutes just to bring Johnny back online on some of the areas you'd like to chat through, because I have a list here of there are 4 areas that seem to be cropping up from the university point of view time and time again, which is big data, whether that's a help or a hindrance, and there's digital and social, because these days whenever we talk marketing, it seems that most people seem to be talking about that from a social media, digital point of view. Be interesting to see whether you think that that's just another sort of media, whether it's at the heart of what marketing does, whether it's a channel, and so on, and also whether we're still in control of brands or not, because it seems to be a big issue. We ran a big seminar here at Aston 2 weeks ago, actually, just talking about whether we control brands. And we couldn't really get to a decision as to how much control marketers now have, because a lot seems to be in the control of consumers at the moment. And then finally, really, to ask Johnny to do a bit of future gazing, what he thinks the next big trends are, because he works an awful lot with Google, particularly with those in the social media area as well as those in fast-moving consumer goods, that sort of thing. So if you're able to send through a few questions, let's see where we are. There's a few coming through at the moment. Dan, that'd be great, because we can then take the conversation in that direction. As soon as we have some more news from Johnny, we'll get back to you. Yeah, hi everyone. We just had a couple of questions that have come through. Thanks very much for those. What advice would Johnny have to start the career in advertising? It's very interesting from an Aston point of view that many of our marketing students and business management students don't really think of advertising as a career, because they think it's more of a creative industry. But when they find out more about it, they can see that there's a bit of a commercial side to it, in terms of account management, running strategies, really the more commercial areas of all of that. And we do find, as I said earlier, about 10% of our students and marketing students work in the field of advertising. I suppose advertising is quite a large catch-all of a word, really. It's just a question of whether, when you go agency side, whether you're talking about digital, whether you're talking about a small agency, or whether you're talking about working for some of the big ones like Billings and Cartmel, McCann, that sort of thing. Okay, Johnny, you're back in the room.
I'm back. I'm back in the room. Sorry about that.
Yeah, welcome back.
What happened? Where did you lose me? Right at the beginning.
I was going to say, if we go back to the beginning, that would be really helpful. Yeah, start from there.
Yeah. Okay. Starting from. Okay, so apologies for that. I work on a lot of tech brands and companies and spend my life on video chats, and one of the curses of all technology is that a fair amount of the time this will go down. Right, so yes, 1992, graduated from MAS. I'd done my year out in oil, in marketing. I'd worked at Mobil Oil. At the time, Mobil Oil was a big place for MAS students to go and spend the year out. But I decided I wanted to work either on the advertising side or on the client side, and I applied to the usual suspects from P&G, Unilever, MasterFoods, and also a lot of agencies. And I kind of lent, agency was my hope, partly because I liked the idea of doing a diversity of different projects, and that's one of the appealing things. And I think I probably also like the slightly more informal nature of agencies. As you can see, I'm not dressed in a suit and tie. I probably haven't worn one of those for quite a while, so I think I pretty quite like the relatively informal culture of agency life. But I applied to about 15 agencies, had about 7 interviews, 2 final interviews where I got down to the last round, and no offers, which was extremely disappointing. But this was probably the first of the kind of great life lessons for me, which was I decided not to accept the fact that I had no offers, and I wrote to the people I'd got to the final round with and began to plead my case. And I ended up creating a series of kind of creative props. I wrote an ad for one of them. I mocked up the front page of Campaign magazine and wrote all the articles. So I basically created various weird and wonderful assets and sent them off to those agencies. And after a couple of months of back and forth, Saatchi & Saatchi wrote me a very nice note saying that they had decided to create an extra space on their grad trainee program. And I started at Saatchi's in 1992. I was then probably surprised that no one at Saatchi & Saatchi had done a marketing degree, and found myself often in meetings, kind of caught in this situation where people who are very senior, very successful, and very smart, didn't seem to want to engage in conversations around the fundamentals of marketing, which I thought was a lost opportunity. Didn't mean that the agency wasn't producing great and interesting creative advertising, but I didn't think they were necessarily answering the real marketing questions to hand. So I probably started agitating from quite a young age and asking all sorts of seemingly naive questions around why we were doing things a certain way. And in one hand, that could have probably alienated me at Saatchi's. I think in a way they quite liked the fact that there was somebody who was asking these questions. It seemed to do quite well for me, but I think ultimately I decided that Saatchi's wasn't the right place for me in terms of pursuing marketing in its broadest. So I ended up going to another agency called CDP, which at the time had been a great advertising brand, had fallen on hard times, but they just hired a couple of very interesting people, most notably a guy called Johnny Vulkan, who now is the head of a very successful global agency network called CHI and the And Partnership. He's one of WPP's golden boys in many ways, and I think even in the running to maybe succeed tonight in Sorrel. I may be so bold as to suggest he's probably up for the job, but at the time I was probably 24, he was maybe 28. And I joined Johnny to pursue a broader version of communications at CDP where we tried to do integration. I don't think even then we necessarily had it cracked, but I think at least we were trying to deliver a more holistic solution for clients and offer more than just advertising. So we were looking at doing direct marketing and point of sale, dealer programs. We had a lot of car business, and that was a great time for me in showing that creative agencies could have the ambition to provide a broader marketing solution. I don't think we had everything right at the time, but it kind of gave me some clues as to what work I would like to be doing and maybe the kind of company that I would like to work at or be involved in going forward. So fast forward a couple of years, I had moved again to work for a guy called Carl Johnson, who is now one of my business partners, but at the time I worked for him. And once again, I was kind of pushing and probing around, questioning our model as an industry and as an agency and how we did work. And Carl got asked if he wanted to come and run the New York office of TBWA, Good Global Network. And I, at the time, was doing this rather wonderful role of being consigliere to Mr. Johnson as a kind of right-hand man. And he asked me if I wanted to join him and come to the States to try and fix the New York office. So in 1999, at the beginning of the dot-com boom, I left to go to the US thinking I'd probably be gone for about a year. But 17 years later, I'm still in the US. And for the next 2 years, we basically ran a successful US ad agency. We had nice clients. We had clients like PlayStation and Nissan and kind of good brands. But still there was this little itch that I needed to scratch, which was I still felt we weren't really answering the real questions. And I think this is one of the fundamental things which really does go all the way back to my time at Aston. And when I was talking to the guys at Aston a few weeks ago about these conversations, I said that so much has changed in marketing, and I said I worry for students today because I'm not quite sure what you would be taught, given that most people in industry don't know what they should be doing in marketing today, and that includes both clients and agency side. But one thing I do still feel to be true is that there are some fundamental principles that are still very valid. I think Kotler's 4 Ps as a kind of a classic anchor are still valid, and whilst all the channels may change, if you're in the business of producing a good product or a good service, delivering it in smart channels, pricing it fairly, then actually the last part of that, the promotion aspect of it, is actually very simple and very straightforward, I think. But agencies don't really have those conversations, and the agencies where I worked were typically in the business of a client would come in, show you their product, and we'd immediately start thinking in terms of how we would advertise that product. And the marketing muscle would always kick in and go, is this really the right product? Is it really being sold in the right places? Is the pricing as good as it could be? Are there other questions we should be asking about this product or service before we decide that we should be communicating or deciding how we're going to communicate it? And agencies aren't incentivized to ask that question because if the answer is you're right, we should rethink this, then the chances are the ad agency is going to lose out on that business. They're not going to get paid. So unless you're making advertising, you're not getting paid. And whilst that was a business reality, it didn't stop me wanting to answer the real question. So the birth of Anomaly really came out of a desire to answer people's real marketing questions and to have relationships with clients where a client comes in to talk about their business, and we talk about the widest definition of that business and the assets of that business and their long-term planning, and then we decide where we can apply our creative thinking. And some of that might be advertising, but quite often it might involve some product innovation. We might talk about repositioning the business. But we get really into the nitty-gritty of marketing in the broadest possible definition. And only then at the very end do we default to producing communications. So where we stand today, so now we started Anomaly in 2004. We now have 600 employees in 6 offices. The first office being New York, where I spend most of my time. We have clients like Beats, YouTube, Budweiser, Google, Converse, Johnny Vulkan, Lego. So really amazing clients, and produce everything from large-scale TV commercials or video. In fact, most of the stuff we produce now, or quite a lot of stuff we do produce now, doesn't actually end up on TV. It's mainly produced for social media. Last week, our LA office produced a very large-scale campaign for Beats, featuring about 30 different athletes and celebrities. So that's kind of the very grand scale we're producing that kind of work. And then with clients like Lego, we don't produce any communications at all. We're working with them upstream and working on what the future of play might look like in 2 or 3 years' time, and what kind of products and services they may choose to offer. So it runs the gamut from product innovation and starting with the product itself and cracking that part of the marketing equation, all the way through to promotion. So that's the kind of the basic lay of the land.
So, Johnny, it's very interesting to hear how you've moved through your career, and I'm sure I'd like to maybe unpack a little bit about why you chose the marketing career in the first place, because I just picked up some phrases which are really very interesting. Asking questions, challenging, thinking about things in a different way. Your phrase was asking real marketing questions. I mean, with an MAS degree from Aston, you could have chosen management consulting, maybe accountancy, dare I say that, or a number of career paths. So I'm wondering whether marketing for you was about asking questions and challenging, and what was it about marketing that you thought, that's what I want to do?
Well, I would say that the start of that journey was a happy accident, really. When I chose to come to Aston to do a management degree, I only had a very kind of broad, simplistic understanding of what management and marketing might be. But I think, you know, and it's simplistic. I think you see products and services in the world, you see communications in the world, and they kind of seem interesting and exciting. And you wonder what is the discipline that underpins all that, and what is the process. And you could say that in this day and age, actually, a lot of engineering and software development actually is one of the most creative industries, and a lot of great ideas are being born there. But I think a lot of great ideas are born through a marketing process. And I was always interested in how things got created and how they might exist in the world, and why do some things appeal more than others. And I would consider myself to remain a very curious person. I mean, what I love about my job is that I can go from a meeting on soups and sauces with Campbell's to playing with Lego bricks to business models for YouTube's video platforms, and it's just continuous stimulus. It's a continuous, range of very different topics. And so for me, marketing appeals because of the diversity of questions you would get to answer. But it's a little bit of luck as well. I kind of sort of stumbled into it, and then even the decision to go agency side versus client side. I think initially my instinct was to go client side, and I think the vast majority of MAS graduates that have chosen the marketing strand do end up on the client side of the business, and I have a lot of friends that have got great jobs on the client side. For me, I think I have a sort of a nervous energy that means that I actually quite like to dabble with lots of different things. And I think I mentioned earlier on the informality of agency life versus client life really appealed to me, which is why I kind of chose that as a path. But I think today one of the things I look for in people we hire is a curiosity and energy around wanting to understand how things work and why things are the way they are, and to challenge them if they think they might be wrong or could be improved upon. And I would like people that ask a lot of smart questions and want to pursue more interesting answers, rather than just accept that things can remain at status quo and should, not be challenged.
Yeah, it's funny actually, because when you were partway through, I wrote down curiosity, and then you said curiosity 3 or 4 times, and I know you're very keen on curiosity, asking questions, challenging. Do you think there are other agencies still have that interest, and are there some tips at this stage of the conversation that you could give to the students online who want a marketing career as to, the 2 or 3 things that they should bear in mind if they're going agency side?
I think good agencies have always been curious places and always good at asking questions. I think the other attribute that's really important is empathy. I'm just looking at a question from Amanda. Hello, Amanda. About understanding corporate culture of your clients. And I think one of the things we spend a lot of time doing is not assuming we understand the client's business because we have bought the product or have seen the product manifest in the real world. We spend a lot of time trying to hang out with all the parts of the client's business. We like to get deeply into the politics of the client, the financial situation of the client, the drives of the individuals involved, because so much of business is actually really not logical or rational. Maybe one of the big epiphanies for me on graduating was there's the academic version of business, and then there's the human version of business. And the human version of business is very frail and flawed, because a lot of it's down to emotions and ego and personal ambition, and in some cases that can be very powerful and very good if the right people are wielding kind of the authority. In other cases, that's where problems can also arise and issues can occur. So I think good agencies ask a lot of questions and listen more than they talk. They're good listeners. They're highly empathetic to the client's business and to the individuals involved. They don't assume they know everything. But then they do take a step back, and with the clarity that comes with being on the outside of an organization, can kind of paint different pictures and different paths for clients. And I think in each case you have to, I think some agencies have a formula for this, or they have a trademarked process to get there. Certainly I've worked at agencies where there are trademark processes and charts and diagrams that get there. I think there are certain questions that recur, but actually I think our instinct as a company is to really design our process for the question at hand. The culture of Lego is so different than the culture at YouTube, is so different than the culture at P&G, is so different than the culture at Beats versus Budweiser. And therefore there isn't one singular process that would work for all of them. You have to really cast the right team from the agency side, people that are going to get on with those clients, stand up to those clients, challenge those clients, be empathetic to those clients, and then navigate your way through that. I think there are other agencies and they're the ones that are fading, who are still trying to sell what they used to sell. And those are the ones that I think are more likely to go into a meeting trying to sell you the kind of thing they make versus listen to what your business problem is and then try and work with you to build your solution that's right for your business. And I think we've always been very clear that our only motivation is our client success. And our success comes through our client success. There isn't a separate work stream for us called winning awards or what do our peers think. We're very focused on how we can help our clients win in their market and in their category. And I think that's what's led to the fact that most of our clients have been with us for many, many years, and we have a very deep and healthy relationship with them, because we are less fixated on what our marketing industry thinks of us and more fixated on what each of our clients' industries think of them and how they're doing, and our reward comes through them.
Johnny, it's fascinating. Having worked client side for about, I suppose it was about 20 years, there were certain of my colleagues who quite liked to be challenged and other colleagues that didn't. I'm wondering how far you can go on challenging, how you manage that so you don't go too far, and whether all clients really do like to be challenged, really.
My simple gauge on it is if you've got to speak the truth. If you see something that's wrong and you don't talk about it, then you're not doing a good service to your client. And if they're the kind of client that doesn't want to have things pointed out or have that debate, and this is obviously done very politely and respectfully, but if they're not willing to engage in debate about issues, they're probably not the right kind of client for us. And we certainly haven't built a business that says we want to work with every brand in the world and every business in the world and every client in the world. I think we are pretty clear that we work for businesses and brands that we respect. We work with individuals that we respect. We like to have debates. We're not scared to have heated debate and argument. We're not scared to push. We will always do it politely and appropriately. But if you just want a vendor to make you some marketing materials, we're probably the wrong company to work with. And there's a great business in just, supplying materials to people that have a clear view of what they want and who don't want to be challenged. So I think, you have to decide which part of the industry you want to be in. Certainly we could have built a very different company that was a service delivery business that just manufactures marketing assets and puts them into the market and asks us questions. It would probably be more profitable, it would probably be bigger, but we wouldn't have as much fun doing it. And I think what we've done is I genuinely still love my job, and I still get excited going to these meetings, and I still get excited learning about new categories, new industries, and what the future looks like. And we have a lot of fun asking questions and having debates with our clients, and I think they quite enjoy that as well. And as I say, I think it's always self-selecting. There's not a hard and fast rule that says you should ask lots of questions or you shouldn't ask lots of questions. My personal leaning is I like the debates, and I think we tend to attract the kind of clients that also like to have those debates.
I've just been actually trying to sort of consolidate what you've just said into a word, and the word that comes into my head is disruptive. You maybe take in a very positive way, a disruptive view on client relationships and what you offer. And we keep hearing in the marketing world about disruptive parts of marketing, what's happening. I've got 3 or 4 here that I'd just like to share with you. The first one is all about big data. There's just so much chatter about big data at the moment. Do you have any view on whether big data is a help and a hindrance, and how you should use it and what you shouldn't do from your experience?
Yes, I mean, I think for me, big data is both a help and a hindrance. And I think that the buzzword side of big data, I think, has become problematic, because for maybe the first year everyone was excited, and then in the second year everyone was dismissive, and I think neither are necessarily the right way to come at it. I think it's really all about how you interpret data. I think too much data is a bit of a curse, and certainly we deal with client organizations where they're drowning in information and end up only being able to decide based on that information. And so they're using data sometimes as a go, no go, as a comfort blanket. And I think data is more interestingly used when you can tell interesting stories with it, become very kind of visceral, and allow people to take informed leaps. Because I think the most interesting businesses tend to understand the market context, understand where things are going, and then often take a step into a space where maybe there isn't necessarily a clear map for where they're going, but they have a hunch on where it works. I mean, I'm sure, for example, all the hotel chains and businesses had tons of data about business travel and state of travel in general and pricing models, but none of them predicted Airbnb. And Airbnb was the invention of a designer who was solving his own personal problems around where to stay when he traveled. So out of nowhere comes a model that the data models wouldn't be able to predict or unearth, but required a kind of leap of faith. But then Airbnb today is in fact a data business. And so Airbnb's growth comes through the software platform and identifying like-minded individuals who might be interested in the service as a solution for them. So I think the modern brands, most of which have not been built through advertising, have been built through understanding data and information, and understanding social platforms, and understanding those network effects. So I think data should be used to inform, data can be used to build. I think an over-reliance on data becomes suffocating. And I think you need to employ people that can humanize data and allow it to tell stories that a broad audience can understand. I think maths was never my strong point, and a chart full of numbers is something that terrifies me. But I do understand the stories that can be created by those numbers, and I can understand the trends that come through those numbers. And I think what we find works really well is the translators, the people who can look at vast swathes of data and distill it into something that's much more human and valuable and interesting. We're spending a lot of money building our own software actually around data at the moment, which basically is just designed to paint the reality of consumer behavior and to understand, there's so much information around in terms of location, your browsing history, your shopping history. All this data is for better or for worse, very visible to people who will subscribe to those data sets. And so as a marketing business, we subscribe to a lot of those data sets, and we can now paint very clear pictures about real behaviors, not even reported behaviors. In fact, we were working with a company a few weeks ago who predicted Trump's election victory weeks before the election, based on the types of chatter and the conversations that they were seeing across various platforms. And they said it's not showing up in the polls because the polls are people asking a question and people saying what they're going to say, and your polling may be ineffective. But we can now look at real life behavior and real life conversations, and so many of those are very visible. And you can draw conclusions from watching those things. And as I said, so it's a mix of data science, and it's a mix of social science, and then a mix of creative interpretation. So I'm excited about it as a space. I think, as I say, it's I think it can be debilitating, but I think pulling out pieces and finding people who can disseminate the right pieces is going to be a very powerful tool for a lot of creative companies going forward.
Yeah, you make some really interesting points there, actually, because as I think what you're saying is data's not there just for validation. It's there to prompt new and interesting questions about your business, new market spaces, new ways of looking at your business, and potentially being a source of innovation. You mentioned behaviour there, and on this side of the pond, there's every time I certainly go to an advertising agency, which is reasonably frequently these days, I seem to be fed behavioural economics and neuroscience. I wondered what your thoughts were on what contribution both of those could make, and whether you subscribe to the current use of them.
Yeah, I mean, I think I am a fan of both topics, and in terms of, once again, adding to informing potential answers. I mean, I think neuroscience in particular is very interesting, and if you run some tests, you can produce some stuff that will validate some of those theories around even people's behavior around how they're consuming content today, in terms of, you know, if you think that when I started in micro and advertising, we were still very much in the interrupted model of, you know, I'm going to pause this TV program that you're enjoying, and I'm going to force you to sit through 3 or 4 minutes worth of content, and then you can return to your normal programming. And it just doesn't work that way. And so much of video content today is consumed with the sound off. It's just scrolled through as you're scrolling through your Facebook feed on your mobile device. So, but within that, there are some science learnings as to what are the formats that actually are stickier for people in this new environment of a very scrollable world with no audio, and things optimized for a 5-inch screen versus a 48-inch screen. So I think these things are valuable. Once again, I think we don't use them to make decisions for us. We use them to inspire and inform new thinking, and I think that's how we treat research. Some of our clients research all the work before it runs, and we work with those clients, and we will create assets that can try and approximate for what a response might be. We prefer, if asked, to use research to help improve ideas, improve comprehension, but then there are so many variables once you put any thinking into the marketplace. The weather that day, the news cycle that day, what competitors do that week, relationships with retailers, that you can't account for everything, and you have to run stuff live. I think, once again, the modern brands have really been built by running stuff live. They very much work on a test and learn approach. You have agencies that will still kind of spend weeks arguing over a headline that's going to go into an ad, and the modern agencies are producing 30 headlines that are running across digital media, testing them all, and then picking the 3 best ones to kind of double down on. And some of those assets then go into physical media, like a poster. So about a few years ago, we used to use social media as a way to test headlines before running headlines in physical media. So we would use Facebook posts and responses to Facebook posts to see which headlines resonate with our audience, and then we would then use those to print on a physical poster, and we'd know already that headline was the one that was communicating the most clearly, or had the most kind of resonance. So yeah, we use kind of, we're open to listening to any theory and any form of stuff that can help improve comprehension. We rarely become fully beholden to any of them, and I think particularly in the last decade, you think how many new data sources and ways of understanding things that have surfaced. I think we see our job as just remaining very much on the front line and keeping our hands very dirty, and always looking for new clues as to where we might learn more insights and more ways to understand consumers. That's why I say we avoid creating too much of a trademarked process as to how we do that. I think we just have this insatiable appetite for kind of continuously second-guessing ourselves and asking questions and pursuing it that way.
Yeah, because the terms neuroscience, behavioral economics, whenever I come across them, seem to be used more and more in a digital social media context. And there's still a conversation going on as to whether digital and social is a channel, whether it should be the lens that you look at all of your marketing through, and everything should really be driven in that way. I wondered what your view is, Johnny, on whether digital is a channel, whether it's just another source of media, whether it depends, or whether you have an insight of your own on all of this.
Yeah. So I think we just go digital. Just it is a fundamental part of how any business is going to operate today. So once again, Airbnb couldn't exist without technology. Uber couldn't exist without technology. YouTube couldn't exist without technology. So the most interesting brands of the last decade, and even if you think about our new behaviors with brands like Starbucks, I bought my Starbucks this morning using the Starbucks app. Digital has kind of touched every aspect of pretty much every business. Physical retailers are under threat because of digital, and other retailers have seen it as an opportunity. So it's kind of all pervasive, and with regards kind of social is both social is fascinating, because if I go back once again to the early days of Facebook, it was all about organic, it was all about producing interesting channels and people would come to you. And today social is just primarily for most ad agencies another place to buy media, to place media, very well targeted media. So it's now a very expensive place to be. It used to be a very cheap place to be. It's now a very expensive place to be. But it's also, and this is where it's very interesting, it's intrinsically woven into a lot of businesses. So I think how many businesses and services you sign up for when you log in with your Facebook account. So it's become the kind of integral fabric of a lot of subscription services and business operations. So it's hard to think of it as just one thing or another. It's kind of, digital is certainly just all pervasive, and you can't imagine any business today not posing the question as to how technology might impact their business. And with regard to social, similarly, it's not only a great channel for targeting people, it's also they also represent platforms on which you can build businesses. And certainly their aspiration there, I think, for most of the social media operators is to go more deeply into building out those businesses, and everyone's chasing, the big, Facebook's holy grail is to really get your credit card details and make that much more of a shoppable platform. If you're on Amazon, I have the credit card details, and so Amazon is kind of moving in another direction. Apple has your credit card details. Google's trying to get your credit card details. So the big challenge for all the digital platforms is having a means through which you can transact and pay. And so I think pretty much all our clients, we are in active conversations with how existing platforms that we know are coming will impact their fundamental business models, and knowing that for some people their businesses are going to go away. I mean, we do a lot of work with physical retail, and physical retail is a category which is under huge pressure as Amazon and similar online retailers kind of go further and further into their category, and that's going to affect everything from the structure of modern cities to what do we do with all these out of town kind of warehouse spaces, to the nature of high streets, to the nature of services. So there are huge questions thrown up by digital at large, and I find it hard to think that any client isn't affected by it. So I think we just go, it's like electricity. It's a fundamental element of society, people's businesses, and everyone has to have a view as to how it might challenge their part of the puzzle.
I guess, Johnny, that for clients there are probably opportunities with digital, social that they haven't uncovered, but I wonder, I'd like to review on whether they sometimes do themselves any favours or whether they structure themselves, because conventionally big corporate marketing departments, you see a team that does segmentation, a team that does comms, another one that does product management, and then digital and social then seems to be somewhere else within that team. I just wonder if you've got any advice on what client structures you find work well and how they integrate digital and social effectively because of it.
I would worryingly say that most client structures we deal with haven't worked out how to structure themselves effectively. And as you rightly point out, digital has become an additional department, often driven by the people who were interested in the early days of kind of more overt digital, and kind of quote unquote the nerds in any group were often given the task. And I think one of the curses of, I think once again, if you think back to when I graduated in '92, marketing as an academic discipline, whilst growing since the 60s, was still relatively young, and marketing departments were still relatively small. And now marketing organizations are huge, and unfortunately have separated all the different facets. So there might be a group who are involved in innovation who are a long way away from the group who are involved in communication and pricing and distribution, and the separation of these divisions has created problems and has created flaws. And I think if you look at certainly Apple under Steve Jobs, I think what makes Apple such a powerful brand and business is that Steve Jobs was fundamentally interested in not only the products they were making, but how they would be communicated to people. He was a true marketer in that sense, in wanting to have control over all of that. I think a lot of modern organizations, those skill sets have been separated out, and then within the communications side of the business, split out again to somebody who's doing commercial advertising, somebody who's doing digital advertising, somebody which is separate again from somebody who's doing e-commerce. And all those things need to be actually much more closely aligned and integrated. And I think once again, why the Airbnbs of the world and the Ubers of the world have grown so fast and so effectively. These are very lean organizations, very low headcounts. The senior people are very involved in every aspect of that business and can therefore move very fast, versus the P&Gs of the world, who are huge, who have a playbook that was a kind of a pre-digital playbook, and have kind of struggled to adapt the organizational structure to deliver what modern marketing solutions look like. So I think, a big part of what we do is have conversations with clients around organizations. In fact, probably our most successful today is we work very closely with Hershey's. And we started working on Hershey's 3 years ago. And we give them one brand as a test. The marketing solution for that brand is a very social-driven campaign. But we've used that and worked with them to effectively reorganize how they approach all their marketing, and it's changed how they sit, the technology they use internally, the structure of the groups internally. So the marketing solution we gave them has actually changed their internal organization, and they were very open-minded to doing that. So for me, that's a great outcome. We don't overtly set out to be in the business of organizational change, but I do think that organizational change is a required outcome of modern marketing. And for the really big organizations, that's probably going to be the hardest thing. And I think what we try and do when we start an engagement with a new client is try and find a small project within that organization to basically road test how you could do it another way. And if that proves to be successful, then we find that the organization has an appetite to try and apply those learnings across the organization, and that can often lead to change. So rather than come in and go, you need to change, this is what change is like, we actually try and demonstrate the change on a smaller project so they can feel it and understand it. And then that often inspires them to actually start the reorganization process. But we don't overtly push it as a service, but it has increasingly started to become an outcome, and I do think it's probably a requirement for a lot of big businesses to work out how they're going to adapt and take advantage of the opportunities that technology has made available to so many.
In taking the different approach that you take at Anomaly, I'm just looking at Julian's question here, leads nicely into what you would say the USP of Anomaly is. I don't know whether you've thought about that, whether it's just emerged. It's an interesting question.
Yeah, I mean, I think the reason we chose the name Anomaly was we didn't want to be defined. We didn't want to be defined as an ad agency, a design agency, a digital agency. for each of our clients, they probably perceive us slightly differently. So nor did we actually want to be a series of founders' names either. We wanted the idea of the company to be bigger than any individual. I always describe it as solving business questions creatively. That's kind of what I talk about when put on the spot to try and start defining it. And for me, what makes us different from certainly the ad industry, we don't just compete with the ad industry. Interestingly enough, we'll often find ourselves pitching for projects we've pitched against McKinsey and Bain, we've pitched against IBO, we've pitched against design agencies like Interbrand or Collins. And so we find ourselves in lots of different competitive battles. But certainly kind of probably the ad industry is the place that most people would want to would assume that we sit. Those companies aren't really interested in solving the business question. They are designed really to give you an advertising answer to a question from a client. And we start most of our engagements with our clients saying, we'd like to hear about your business. We'd like to hear about your challenges. And then we'd like to talk with you about what you think the question is. And we spend a lot of time trying to work out what the question is we think we're trying to answer. That's very different than going into an agency where they open the meeting by showing you the reel of great ads they produced. Now that might be great, and maybe you want an ad like the John Lewis ad or an ad like, name any kind of great campaign that's out there, and that might be fine for you. We are excited when we get to talk about people's businesses, and then we're also willing to not produce any advertising and just have an engagement that's actually more of a management consultancy type engagement around kind of mapping out a plan for the next 3 years as a business. And in fact, even that goes down to the way we charge. We charge for kind of outcomes, not by hours. Once again, a lot of agencies will charge by the hour. They'll go, we're going to need this many people, this many hours, this many days, this many months. And therefore that incentivizes agencies to put a lot of people in a business and to take a long time doing it. We agree an amount based on an agreed outcome for the project once we define the question. And if the client's happy with where we get to, then they'll usually give us a bonus on top of that. And if they're not happy, we'll stop working. But I would say in 99% of cases, we find that process actually has kept most of our clients coming back for more. So most of our clients are very long tenured clients going on 7 or 8 years in most cases, some even longer than that. So we find that model really works. But it doesn't start with any predetermined solution for them. It just starts with a desire to make sure we're always answering the right questions for their business.
No issue to put you on the spot, Johnny. One final question, really, a bit of, I don't know whether we call it future gazing or whatever. We've been talking a lot about asking the right questions and challenging. I mean, we've had digital, that's happening, there's big data, various other things that are going on, losing control of brands or clients losing control of brands. But from your position, which is a very, very unique one, what do you think are the next 2 or 3 big questions we should be looking at over the next couple of years?
I think for me, it's a focus on products and services, getting back to what it is you're making and what services you are designing. I feel like there's been very lazy innovation. There's been a lot of kind of, we need another flavor variant, we need another color variant, we need another sort of, cheap variant on thing to try and eke out market share. And I think this requires, and this is something I would urge for just in general, is for marketers to have high empathy for their customers and go, what problems do we actually need to solve for people? How can we make things simpler for people? Are there new market spaces that are genuinely meaningful and add value? And if you design things that are fundamentally useful or good, there'll be a marketplace for those men to do well. I think once again, we'll go to Uber as a solution for transportation. I was just reading the other day how Uber is now being used in some areas as a supplement for ambulance service, with the ambulance service coming under pressure. Airbnb is a solution for accommodation. So you have people who are building new business and categories that solve problems, Meanwhile, I'm staying in a very overpriced hotel that hasn't been updated for many years, that has kind of, old-fashioned technology. And, the hotel room I'm sat in isn't really a great solution for me as a user. I would probably be better off in an Airbnb. For me, I'm probably of a generation where if it was a personal trip, I would take that risk, and there's a certain certainty that comes with staying in a business hotel. But I don't think anyone in the hotel industry has really tried to solve my problem. If anything, they're trying to charge me more for delivering less. The fact that Wi-Fi is an extra charge in a very expensive hotel room is an anathema in this day and age. And I think it's too many business organizations trying to extract more money from their consumers rather than trying to earn more loyalty and love from their consumers. So for me, the focus is on producing fundamentally worthwhile goods and services, and that will lead you to commercial success versus trying to eke out more money from doing more of the same kinds of things. And you will fundamentally use technology to do that. So I think having your doing the extra work around there just to understand what all the new technologies might mean. So everything from new payment platforms to Internet of Things to available personal data from health data through to location data. How might all those new strands of information about consumers be used to help build new types of businesses and services for people? So I think that for me is where we like to focus, and we as a company do a lot of our own IP. So we have the #1 selling lip balm in America as a product that we designed. We also just launched a medicinal cannabis brand. In California, cannabis is legal, and it will gradually be legalized across the US is the current hypothesis. And we've created the first kind of fully rounded brand in that space that explains the science, is very safe, comes with a great deal of technology in terms of how the vape pen is designed, and has been met with great enthusiasm by kind of both the medical community, the retailing community, and is now kind of the poster child for legitimizing a category. But I think that's been designed with high empathy for end users and with great thoughtfulness versus how can we just make some money out of that kind of the growth of that category. So that's where it's very human. It's less about kind of a silicon gold rush and more about an era of empathetic solutions and producing products and services that are fundamentally worthwhile.
Johnny, thank you very much for that. I'm just conscious of the time. I think we're about 1 minute to 7. So just to summarize then, Johnny, we should be asking questions, doing different questions, challenging, and thinking about conventions in a different way. But just one last question to leave you with. Do you still think the basic principles of marketing still hold in this new and exciting context?
Yes, I think I'm still a huge advocate for Kotler all these years on, and as just a grounding to check that you are still answering the right questions. So I think the fundamentals of marketing are still very valid. The channels of distribution have radically changed. The opportunity opened up by technology has radically changed. And the thing that I would encourage everyone to consider is to care about their future customers and have that empathy. And within that requires respecting people as people. So I'm a real fan of, is this a product or service you would like your mother, father, sister, brother, wife, uncle to buy and spend their money on? Would you recommend it to them? So are you working that? And for people to be themselves. I think too many people enter business and by putting on a suit, put on a kind of an act that makes them into someone who is hard and emotionless and slightly ruthless, and yet at the weekend they're out in the back garden cooking a barbecue and inviting the neighbours over and playing with the dog. And I like it when people bring that version of themselves to work, brings the real them to work, and applies that to business, because I think that produces more thoughtful solutions and answers, and more appropriate solutions and answers. So don't feel you need to be anything other than you in how you pursue your career. Yeah.
Sorry, Johnny. After you.
No, I just the last thing I would just want to, which is another thought, which was, I think also feel that you have the authority and license to question existing processes. Once again, the people at Marriott, Hilton, Starwood, no one in their organization asked the appropriate questions, and therefore no one saw an Airbnb coming. And I suspect that there might have been so many young graduates in those organizations that had maybe seen the clues to that. And I think there's nothing to stop people entering the marketplace today from asking questions and challenging kind of the sacred cows of their industry and their category. So I urge you to do that respectfully, do it in an informed way, but be fearless in asking questions of people above you, because despite what you may think, people often don't know all the answers, and actually will be excited by an enthusiastic person who is excited to kind of discover what's next in any category.
Johnny, thank you very much. A very big thank you on behalf of the university. I think you've given us quite a bit to think about, and maybe to test and challenge what we do in our current roles and the marketing world more widely. So we look forward to staying in touch with you and maybe doing something more on this in the future, hopefully. And we wish you a very successful week over in San Francisco. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you very much. Happy to chat. And if there's any more follow-up questions, I'm happy to kind of answer a few more questions offline later as well.